Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Tag Tuesday. It's been a while since I've done a tag. Sean the Book Maniac was kind enough to tag me twice, I think in the last month. Once to do the It's All Relative tag and a second time to do this, the Book Nostalgia tag. And I decided to do this one. The Book Nostalgia tag was created by Noah over at the channel Everybody Who Reads It Must Converse. Everybody go check out Noah's channel. Particularly on Friday nights, he does a live stream, which is great for our BookTube community. Lots of people drop by there. I know time zones may prevent some from doing so, but if you get a chance, go by his channel and check that out. It's fun every Friday night, and I try to be there as often as I can. And thanks to Sean for tagging me to do this. I'll leave a link to his video down below. And the idea here is really one of the kind of tags that I like, where it's not necessarily just about finding a book that fits a category, even though there is some of that here, but it actually gives you an opportunity to tell stories about yourself, and who doesn't like that? And being kind of a hoarder of things, I decided to add a little element to the Book Nostalgia tag by also doing a T-shirt nostalgia tag representing different times of my life. So this first one is the I'm Just a Bill Schoolhouse Rock T-shirt. I am a child of the 70s. I grew up in the 1970s watching Schoolhouse Rock, and the I'm Just a Bill one was one of my favorites. By the way, these T-shirts are oftentimes quite old, and some of them fit me better than others, and I'll try to keep it to where you can only see the parts of me that the T-shirt covers. But the first prompt in the tag is to talk about the oldest book from your life that you still own. So the oldest book from my life that I still own is this book, which I got from my granny's house when they moved out, and it is a part of a series called The Home University Bookshelf. This is volume 6, Famous Stories in Verse. I have another one of these volumes which basically has all kinds of arts and crafts ideas, including some kind of clever ideas about how to draw cartoons using numbers. Anyway, I've had this book. My granny's had this book in her house you know, from the 1940s. I believe this one was published in 1946. It has great color plates and pictures in it. Some stories in verse that, you know, I think most people in Western civilization might recognize. So I spent many a day. See how beautiful that picture is? I spent many a day at my granny's house, who used to oftentimes pick me up after school, looking through this book and through her other books. And when she had to move to a senior citizens home before she died, I took a couple of these books for pure nostalgia reasons. And you know, since this is the nostalgia book tag, I can't think of a more nostalgic book than that one. So the second T-shirt in my nostalgia T-shirt collection to go along with the nostalgia book tags, this one I've already shown on my channel before. It's from the bar/nightclub I probably spent the most time in when I was in college in the 1980s. That was called Crossroads in Nacogdoches, Texas. I went to Stephen F. Austin State University, and I probably spent close to as much time at Crossroads as I did to studying for classes that weren't history classes, so I thought this was appropriate for the next T-shirt in my collection. Question number 2 is the first loved library book. What's the first library book that you loved? I don't have a copy of this. I'll try to put a copy or an image of the cover over here. I think the first library book that I truly loved as a kid was called, and I've mentioned this before on my channel, it was called You Were There at the Battle of the Bulge. This was a book for kids about, this was a series of books for kids, you know, 6th grade and younger probably, about major historical events. A lot of them had to do with battles. I suspect that they were published specifically so that little boys like me with an interest in history and battles and war and stuff like that would find something to read, and it worked perfectly. I remember distinctly going into the library in the new wing of the elementary school where I went. By the way, the new wing was essentially a cave. I don't know why they built schools like this in the 1970s, but at my elementary school there were different wings, and they'd been built a long time ago, so that the doors all opened out onto a wide kind of covered sidewalk, and there were windows along 2 sides of the walls. But in the new wing, there were no windows. There were only windows in the doors at the end of the halls and next to the doors in the halls, which meant that the classrooms had no windows, and they were essentially painted cinder block classrooms, and in my memory the library was painted this incredibly awful pale green color. Anyway, I remember distinctly going to the shelves and looking for a book and finding the, We Were There, or maybe it was You Were There at the Battle of the Bulge book, and taking it off the shelf and reading it. I had an interest in history because my dad was a history teacher for a brief period of time and a history enthusiast his whole life. So wanting to be like my dad, I took that book down and I read it. And I think I read several more in the We Were There, or You Were There at the Battle of, or You Were There at this event books. And those books really meant a lot to me and probably helped, shape my love of history. So T-shirt number 3 comes from the first vacation that my wife and I actually took together. That was vacation to visit and stay with her aunt and uncle in Chicago, and they were just lovely, welcoming people. And they took us all around to see sites in Chicago. My favorite was the Art Institute of Chicago, and I bought a T-shirt very similar to this one on that first trip, only it was black with white lettering, and this part was in red, but that shirt got old and worn out, so the next time we went I bought a replacement, which is this shirt, which is from the Art Institute of Chicago, and it has the signatures of lots of famous artists, Duchamp and Renoir, etc. on there. And I never really wore this shirt because once I got it home I thought, maybe a red t-shirt isn't the best idea, but I kept it because it reminds me of that vacation, of both those vacations really, and how great those were. So prompt number 3 in terms of the book nostalgia tag is to talk about a book that was given to you. So I'm going to talk about this edition of Through the Wheat by Thomas Boyd. If you've watched my channel, you're probably already tired of hearing me talk about this book and talk about Through the Wheat and Thomas Boyd, who I just did research and writing on more than a decade and a half ago, probably almost 2 decades ago. Living in the past, it's the nostalgia tag. This copy of Through the Wheat, though, was given to me by my Uncle John, who was a book collector. He just loved to scour the shelves of used bookstores for books for himself and books for other people. And if he knew you were interested in a subject, he would look for those books for you. So when I published my book about Thomas Boyd, I sent him a copy of the book, and he started looking for editions of Through the Wheat to send me. And he found this one, which was a 1927 reissue of Boyd's Through the Wheat with drawings in the book by a Marine from World War I who went on to be an author himself. His name was John W. Stallings, I believe. John Stallings, did I get that right? Probably should get that right. Goodness, I can't turn the pages. Yeah, no, John W. Thompson. Stallings was another World War I writer. John W. Thompson illustrated the book, and he gave this to me, and I really appreciated it. This book means a lot to me. They only printed about, I think, 2,000 of these in 1927 because the book had been out for 4 or 5 years by that time. It was done almost exclusively to try to help Thomas Boyd make money. Max Perkins, his editor, came up with the idea, and they got Thompson to draw the pictures. And they published it and charge more money for it for a regular edition, and it helped Thomas Boyd a lot. And this book, just means a lot to me. So there you go. Okay, so T-shirt number 4 in this trip down memory lane is the incredibly too small Guinness T-shirt that I bought on my wife and I's first trip abroad. We went to Ireland in 1995. As a really belated honeymoon. We didn't have a whole lot of money, so we only went to Ireland for about a week, and we drove all over the country, and we saw whatever sites we wanted to do, and we didn't follow any kind of tour thing, and we just had kind of a great, if at times stressful time. And the first chance I got, I bought a Guinness t-shirt for myself because that seemed like the most Irish touristy thing I could do in Ireland, and it's pretty close. I didn't actually go to Blarney Castle to kiss the Blarney Stone, so I guess that would have been the most touristy thing I could do. But next to that was buying the Guinness t-shirt, which is, far too tight now. It's been a long time since 1995. Prompt number, let's see, what are we up to? Prompt number 4 is to name a book that was recommended to you. I think I'll do the latest book I read that was recommended to me, and that is Quiet Flows the Una by Farouk Sahek, translated from the Bosnian by Will Firth. This book was suggested to me or recommended, not directly to me, but recommended by Jen over at Remembered Reads, and I read it, I enjoyed it. It's possible this book will be in my top 10 books of the year come the end of the year. I enjoyed it. I'm still thinking about it. It's one of those one of those books. So in one of my wrap-ups, I think I did a reading from this book to give you some idea of what it was like. But I really enjoyed that. I get lots of recommendations from booktubers. That's one of my favorite things about BookTube is watching people's videos, seeing what books they're excited about, and then reading those books. In 1996, my son was born, so from now on, all the T-shirts are somehow related to my family or to my kids. My son was born in 1996, my daughter was born in 1998, and this T-shirt is from the Moose Cafe in Asheville, North Carolina. That was the place where we took our first real live family vacation. We went to North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee on vacation, and we stayed in a cabin outside of Asheville, and we just had, generally speaking, a great time, except for my daughter, who got really angry at me because I made up stories about the people who worked at the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina, which she thought were true. She thought I was telling her the truth. In reality, I was just making up stories because I thought it would be fun, and anyway, she got her feelings really hurt. Anyway, I think the Moose Cafe, I don't know if it's still open or not, this was a long time ago. I think the Moose Cafe was famous for its sticky buns, something like that. It made something that supposedly was supposed to be the best anywhere in North Carolina, so we went there for breakfast one day, and I bought this T-shirt. So, prop number 5 in the Nostalgia Book Tag is a buddy read text. I've done a lot of great buddy reads. As a matter of fact, I haven't had a bad buddy read. Sometimes the books are subpar, but I always enjoy getting to talk to people in terms of buddy reads or group reads. And I've seen recently that some people see this as being kind of clannish or cliquish, and I really hope it doesn't come off that way. What it really is just people who come up with or decide they want to read books together, and they do, and then they just talk about it on their channel because, you know, there are channels, and that's what they do. But I picked a buddy read I did. The buddy read book I picked was House on Endless Waters by Amuna Alan. This was a book I buddy read with Britta Bowler, not this last summer, but the summer before. This ended up being a really, to me, beautiful and powerful book, somewhat unexpected. But I picked it to be the buddy read book this time around because I think it's the one that has the most beautiful cover. I don't set a lot of store by book covers and things like that, but this one definitely was beautiful, and that's kind of why I picked it. Okay, so from this point on, all the T-shirts are going to be related to my kids' sporting activities. I am still a recovering sports dad. I am, let's see, going on 2 years of not watching my kids engage in any sporting event, which really is was more difficult than I thought it would be to kind of get over, because my kids were involved in sports from, you know, a really young age. Both of them played Little League baseball, my son and my daughter. My daughter played baseball and not softball because she wanted to be able to do what my son did, who was older. They played Little League baseball, they played youth area basketball, and my son played football. And this is a T-shirt from, believe it or not, his 7th grade B team football team. On the back are the names of all the players on the team. It was a really, really big team. So I had this T-shirt, and I wore it to the games because that's what us sports dads do, or did, or at least it's what I did. So question number 6 is a book introduced to me in school. I went with Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. When I was a senior in high school, I was on my high school's first academic decathlon team. I wasn't a very particularly good team member. I was what we used to call a B. They have fancy names for them now. I think a B is, I don't know, Scholastic or something like that now. But back then you had to read a novel. I don't think they still do. Back then you had to read a novel for the literature test. The academic decathlon is essentially an academic competition over 10 different subject areas. And back then you had to read a novel as a part of that. And the novel my year was Great Expectations. As a matter of fact, this is the edition of Great Expectations they gave me to read for academic decathlon. And I didn't read it. Fortunately, I wasn't a part of the team which ended up having its scores counted competing. I didn't read this because I couldn't get very far in it. I read it later in college, and I reread it again not that long ago. So this would be the book I was introduced to in school, and like many things we're introduced to when we're in high school, I didn't appreciate it nearly as much then as I do now. Okay, so technically this one isn't a T-shirt. This is my son's varsity football jersey. And you think, wow, you still have the varsity football jersey. Down here in Texas, you may know that football is kind of a big deal. And one of the ways in which they fund the football program is they have the kids, when they make varsity football, buy their jerseys. So for my son, we bought this jersey and the white version of this jersey. And they were quite expensive. I want to say that they cost in excess of $300. So since we paid that $300 for the jersey, that means the football program had that much more money to spend on something else, at least conceivably. And I will admit to the whole ridiculousness of Texas high school football and the waste of money. But along those lines of not wasting money, I said I was going to wear this jersey for the rest of my life because it's the most expensive article of clothing I own, and I think that's still true. And it is really tight. My son was an offensive lineman, which meant he was never tackled, but apparently your jersey had to fit really tightly so nobody could grab it and use it for leverage against you. I'll try to keep my arms down so you can't see my armpits or anything like that because it is made to fit over shoulder pads and has really large openings under the arms. Anyway, so the tag for this is, the prompt for this one is genre fiction that inspires nostalgia. And I went with, despite the fact that I don't have the dust jacket anymore, I went with Terry Brooks's Sword of Shannara book. This was a long fantasy novel. It's the first fantasy series, I think, that I started after Lord of the Rings. It's kind of a ripoff of Lord of the Rings, but this one came complete with this kind of color plate picture on the inside. And then there were black and white. I'll see if I can find one. There are also black and white pictures, drawings in here, like this one. This book was, you know, a part of me growing up and being a fantasy reader as a young person. This is also a book, the first time my mom let me order a book from the Book of the Month Club. She was a member of the Book of the Month Club, got the, you know, member book every year, and she let me pick this book and its sequel, The Elfstones of Shannara, from the Book of the Month Club catalog. So it's nostalgic for that reason for me as well. Okay, so prompt 8 is a literary work that inspires nostalgia. By the way, I'm wearing the varsity basketball t-shirt that my daughter's team sold to parents and to their friends as a fundraiser when she played varsity basketball. She was a 2-year letterman in basketball. And of all the people in my family, she's the most athletic. My son's much more athletic than me. My daughter's the best athlete in our family. That comes from their mother's side, not from mine. So I have this varsity basketball shirt. It has her name and number on the back, and I wore this to every home and away game during her senior year when she was on varsity. She had a different shirt and color shirt. I don't know why they weren't team colors. Nobody can still explain it to me. Anyway, prompt number 8 is a literary work that inspires nostalgia. I went with Lonesome Dove. I think I mentioned to you many times that when I was in college, that's really when I became a reader. And in part it was because one of my best friends was a reader, introduced me to Hemingway. It was when I was in college that the Lonesome Dove miniseries came out on TV. And we watched it together after having, we watched it, not necessarily always together, after having read the book Lonesome Dove. And so this book always reminds me of college, of a wintertime in Nacogdoches, Texas, where I didn't go home for the Christmas holidays and neither did this good friend of mine, so we spent essentially all of our time together. And believe it or not, even though it was in Texas, it was cold and icy for a lot of those days, and the house I lived in college, essentially you could feel the wind blow through the house. That's how terrible a house it was. And it was only heated by space heaters, so I spent a lot of time at his apartment watching Lonesome Dove because he didn't have cable, but he did have like Lonesome Dove on VHS tapes and reading and trying to stay warm. And so Lonesome Dove always reminds me of that time in my life. In addition to being a basketball player, my daughter was a 4-year letterman in track in high school, and she was on her college's, Division III college's track and field team when she went to college. COVID robbed her of her senior season, and I had planned to take a lot of days off from school my last year of teaching to go drive all over the state and watch her participate in track and field events. This is the t-shirt I got from her last conference championship for her conference. My daughter threw discus, hammer, and shot in college despite being not a particularly large person. And her best event was hammer. She still holds the school record for in the hammer toss for her school. She was a 3-time all-conference performer in shot and in hammer and discus, and she made her college's all-decade team for the decade of the 2010s. And this is me. This is the last. Her last track meet was the last kid sporting event I went to, and that was in 2020, right before COVID hit. Anyway, the last prompt in Noah's nostalgia or book nostalgia tag prompt is a spiritual text that inspires us nostalgia, and I picked my sister's Bible. I don't know why I have my sister's Bible, but it is a zippered Bible. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those where you can zip it open and close. This really, I think, probably helped my sister to keep the notes that she wrote during church from falling out and being discovered. I have lots of memories of growing up at going to a Church of Christ church. Not all of them particularly pleasant, but lots of memories. And every time I see this Bible or one of those little kind of New Testament Bibles like they used to give out, or used to be able to find, and they used to give out actually in school when I was a kid. Whenever I see one of those, I'm reminded of those religious experiences and sitting in church and seeing all my friends go up and get baptized, and then me being like one of the only 2 holdouts who didn't get baptized the entire time I went there. Something about it just to me never felt right. And then the feeling of betrayal I had when the last person I knew who sat on a pew. By the way, at my church, you sat on a different pew. Let me start. At my church, the teenagers all sat on the front 2, or actually not the very front pew in church, but the 2 right behind that, on the left-hand side as you were looking at where the preacher would stand. We sat there in part so they could keep an eye on us, I think, keep us out of trouble. And the pew right behind the front pew was reserved for teenagers who'd been baptized. So when you got baptized, I'm not joking here, when you got baptized, you went and you moved to the pew in front, and the unbaptized kids like me sat on what was in effect the 3rd pew right behind them. And by the time I was, a senior in high school, the only 2 people left on the unbaptized pew were me and a friend of mine. And then one day he betrayed me and got baptized. I suppose it's better for his, immortal soul, if you believe in that kind of thing. He did get baptized. But then I was left alone. At that point, I just stopped going to church anyway. But there you go. There is the book nostalgia tag, complete with T-shirts, which you didn't want to know anything about, but which I found fun to do. I'm supposed to tag some people. I think this tag has been around for a while, so I'm going to do the lame, tag everybody who wants to do this. If you're, around my age, or perhaps not even around my age, it's fun to think back, and nostalgia is a definite temptation. So thanks, Noah and Sean, for letting me indulge in a little bit of nostalgia here. I look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.